everybody. I think we're live. And let me just say this first and foremost. Y'all give me some grace today. We are starting our very first session of Golden Light Academy. Virtual hand claps. I cannot see who's online. I know that there are people joining from YouTube, from LinkedIn, and I'm really, really excited for what we're doing today. So those of you guys who are out there that have my number, please text me. Let me know if something's going on. Let me know if something is not right, because we know that, I'm a classic millennial and I am a little technologically challenged, but let's go. God is so good, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity today to do our first class. I've been talking about Golden Light Academy with my apprentices, with friends of mine, with family members for over a year. And to see that it is here today, to see that this is a moment of healing for all of us, is absolutely wonderful and phenomenal. I want to take a moment before I get us started today and talk a little bit about what we're doing. And the title of today's moment is Revolutionary Grief. And I know a little bit of something about grief. And so this is something that I think we all need to be able to pour ourselves into. I have friends all over the world who are grieving, not just people that they've lost, but situations that they've had in their lives, the loss of family units, the loss of jobs, the loss of elections, the loss of all types of things that we have come to really understand are a big part of who we are. And so, for those of you who all have known me for the last 40 years, you know that my first love was always music and my second love was always writing. And so many people know me as James B. Golden, the poet and author. And what goes along with that is a young woman named Nikki Giovanni. And this is the thing. I have stayed away from talking about Nikki Giovanni for several reasons. I think I was compartmentalizing. My Nikki Giovanni has not only been a muse for me and someone that I've literally studied her poems. I can recite several of her poems from the top of my head at any time of the day. And Nikki's presence in the Black community and in the global community is it's missing right now. We're missing our poet, and it was very difficult for me to hear about her passing. I had people calling me and texting me, and Jasmine called and said, "Are you okay?" And I've had people reach out and say, "We know how much Nikki meant to you." Nikki Giovanni, I first met Nikki back, oh God, this had to be almost 15 years ago. And I was just starting out as a poet. I hadn't even published my first book. But I met her at one of her book signings, and I knew that she had this relationship with my mentor, Dr. Karen Stanford, who they had written a book together about cancer. And Nikki was the warmest person. I was so scared because I was like, this is Nikki Giovanni. And she said, "You're going to make it." What I found was that her words weren't just in vain. Nikki was talking about something real. After each of the books that I wrote, Nikki Giovanni sent me a handwritten letter. One of them I have framed in her incredible handwriting, and it sits in the office as I'm talking and as I'm writing and sharing. And the things that she has told me, this was after Afro Clouds and Nappy Rain. And Nikki said, "Golden, I've now seen Afro Clouds and Nappy Rain. I've seen Sweet Potato Pie. And I want you to know that you need to keep on keeping on. We need your voice." And so it's really hard for me to say goodbye to her. I think that Nikki is somebody that has given us so much of who she is. And we love you, Nikki. You have been the voice of the struggle. Nikki self-published her first books, and I've self-published my first couple books. I wanted to be just like her, and I saw the relationship that she had with James Baldwin. I saw how she incredibly led Virginia Tech after the heinous shootings that happened. And I remember reaching out to her when I wrote Bull, and she was the first person that I wanted to introduce the book. And Nikki said, Golden, I'm going on vacation, and it's really, I'm going to read your book. I can't write the introduction this time, but I cannot wait to read it. And I know that she did. And I just want you to know, Nikki, on your great vacation in the skies and around us, may you continue to be our poet and our muse. And I hope that you're looking down on me and that you're proud of what this little boy from Salinas, California was able to do. We're going to get started with our show. We have an incredible special guest who's not a guest to me. This is home for me. And so welcome to Golden Global Enterprises. All right, everybody, it's time to bring in a dear friend of mine, somebody I consider family. And I know a lot of you guys are here specifically to see her. She is an absolutely incredible person. Let me start by just sharing a little bit about Janelle Black. And let me call her in so that she can be on camera with me. Hi, Janelle Black, licensed therapist in the Atlanta metro area. And, you know, I think I could probably do your bio because I've known you, I think my entire life. You know, like we have experienced so much together, and you have been a constant in my life, not just as associates, and now we're partners at Golden Global. You're one of our consultants, but in our spiritual walk, in our journeys as individuals, growing, watching you have a beautiful daughter, sharing in loves and losses, which we're going to talk about today. Janelle is really special. Janelle runs a counseling center in the metro Atlanta area called Chrysalis Counseling. And did I get that right?
Yes,
Chrysalis Counseling. And y'all know what chrysalis is. It's, you know, this metamorphosis of a butterfly. But the work that Janelle does, and she specializes, she's one of the very few Black play therapists in all of the country, for one. And then for two, she specializes in grief. And when I started Golden Global, Janelle was one of the first people that I called. I said, we have to do something for the community. We have to let people know that it's okay to grieve, that it's okay that we're humans too. And I know it gets complicated when you have this skin and when you're in these bodies, but there are ways that we can push through, especially during the holidays. So welcome, Janelle. And Janelle, let the people know, like, what's up with you? How have you been? What are you doing out there? What are you excited about?
Well, I guess the thing I'm most excited about is I'm actually not a play therapist yet. I'm working on that certification. And that's what excites me right now. I'm learning more and more about working with the population that I'm passionate about. Because in my own grief journey, one of my biggest losses was my grandmother. And that's when I started therapy myself. And I remember being a kid thinking, I don't just want to sit here and talk to this lady. I want to actually engage and do things that help me work through this grief. There has to be a better way. I knew that as a child. So when I
How old
got
were
into
Janelle? How
college,
old were you when your grandmother transitioned?
I think I was like 7 or 8.
Yeah, so we were just, those people who know us from Salinas and are probably watching from Mount Nebo,
Mhm.
from the Buds of Promise,
Oh,
y'all
yeah.
know, and I know my mom and our families are like family to each other.
Mhm.
Your mom was like a second mom to me, to the point where I was a little scared of her, and your aunts and cousins are like my aunts and cousins. And I
Mhm.
remember my mom had this deep respect and relationship with your grandmother. So we really have all been. But that's interesting that you said this happened around 7, 8. That's when I had my first loss, which was my aunt Bobby, and I don't know if it was the age that I lost her, or if it was just the fact that this was like the one of the most important people in my life. She used to braid my hair and give me baths, and I remember just being completely shattered. I was never the same after my aunt passed away.
Yeah, that's a really hard age to lose somebody. I know, like, I had already lost my father to his addiction before that, but my grandmother's death was a much bigger issue for me. It's the one that stays with me the most. So, yeah.
From your point of view, and I know that we'll have people watching this that have children who are around that age, and we know that life is gonna life. If it doesn't do anything else, people are going to pass things. We're going to lose things. We're going to grieve. What can you share with people who have children around that age that they should really look for? I know when we were talking, as we were getting ready for this, you were talking about you have this ability to recognize grief in children, which really is a gift, because not everybody can see what's really happening for that child. But I imagine that so many of the people watching this are going to experience that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was talking about the other day with you, doing an intake recently, I was talking to a mother who just didn't recognize some of the symptoms that I was asking her about. I was saying, is your child depressed? Is your child anxious? Like, what's bringing you and this child into therapy at this time? And she said, oh, people have teased him. He's a little sad, but it wasn't until I was able to draw a picture for her of what anxiety looks like in children and how it might be different, like how he might be hypervigilant and wanting to know where his mom is at all times. Because I was that child. It was like, oh, Carol Black stepped out. I needed to know exactly where she went, when she coming back, who's with her. Like I needed to know all the details. And the sleeplessness, sitting up at night watching TV until TV went off back in my day, but obviously it
We know
doesn't work.
about that. We know that TV used to shut off. Now, Aaliyah doesn't know that. Janelle's daughter, Aaliyah, she doesn't understand that, but
She
TV
doesn't.
used to shut off. Let me not age myself anymore during this.
Hey, it is what it is. I know how old I am. But just being up all night, not being able to get that rest, having sort of magical thinking around death, like, oh yeah, they passed away, but that wasn't really them in the casket. That was somebody else. And just having a lot of anxieties and a lot of questions around death. And a lot of times parents don't recognize that questioning comes from a place of anxiety, of wanting to
Mm.
understand so that they can make sense of things. And sometimes you'll see it in their play, sometimes you'll see it in the things that they talk about. Like I've had clients who just want to talk about cancer all the time. Well, why do you want to talk about cancer so much? Because they had a family member who struggled with cancer and they had so many questions, but they didn't feel like they could ask their family member. So you might see them being more reserved in the moment because they don't want to upset the family, but they have questions and they have a lot to say and they're internalizing that. And that internalization might look like withdrawing from friends. It might look like not being able to make friends in new social settings and situations. There are lots of different ways that this grief can show up in kids. So I like being able to educate parents and being able to educate the kids and normalize their experiences so that they can heal and they
You
can
know, the
stay.
other thing I think is really interesting about thinking about how children grieve, and I'm glad we started here, is that when I was doing my own grief work, and I've spent the last 5 years, I had a really very traumatic loss of the love of my life 5 years ago. And, you know, Terrence was stabbed to death. And it broke me. Like literally, I had experienced many deaths before that, but it was something about that one that it changed the trajectory of my entire life. And I've spent the last 5 years trying to wrestle with what has death meant to me as an individual. There's been about 30 people that I've lost since my Aunt Bobby that have been close friends, family members, and people that are cherished, very cherished to me. And I had to go back to childhood. And I think that's something that, what do you say for us as millennials, as Xers, as people who are getting older, but we have so many wounds from childhood that we almost don't even want to go back and think about like what was going on for little James or little Janelle when they had those initial losses, and were we ever able to heal from that?
I think that a lot of times we don't like to go there because the feelings are so raw, but we definitely need to embrace that inner child and that hurt that that inner child felt and kind of help that inner child along. Because we talked about this the other day. I truly believe that every loss that we have stays with us. It doesn't ever completely go away, but we have to learn how to cope and how to move forward in some way, some shape, some form or fashion. So I think it's necessary to go back to the beginning sometimes, especially if it's something you haven't dealt with at all, or that maybe it wasn't dealt with properly. Like, maybe your family didn't want to talk about it. Maybe everyone just kind of pushed it to the side and carried on and didn't really address the feelings, didn't really address and honor the loss. Then
Mm.
yeah, it's definitely necessary to go back and honor that loss in whatever way makes sense to you.
Can we just pause there for a second? Now, this isn't from my childhood, but one of the losses that were really difficult in my family, and I wonder, like, do we do this because the losses are so difficult? I can't see us not wanting to honor people, but my cousin Yolanda, who I had built this incredible relationship with in our adult years, died suddenly. And that's another one that wrecked me. I was just not okay. But it felt like our family had experienced so many traumatic and tragic losses that it was almost hard for us to accept that she was gone and to do this, big, beautiful funeral. Like you get tired of
Mhm.
shopping for caskets and making, and I promised myself I was not going to get on here and get emotional today. But everybody who
We knew
listens
you
to me
were.
all the time, they're like, this is what you do. But you get tired of making obituaries and putting up Facebook posts, and I wonder for us and for the people watching, like, is it when we don't celebrate or honor that grief, is it because we've just been through a lot, or is it something else?
Sometimes it's because we've been through so much and it's almost like complex grief. It's grief on top of grief on top of grief, just layers and layers of hurt and depression and anger and all the different negative emotions that come with grief, that we're just like, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. I can't deal with one more loss. I can't deal with one more death, one more mourning period, one more. I mean, you know how the family kind of gets chaotic when people are grieving and all the
Okay,
anniversary
I thought that was just
gifts.
that's a universal thing.
I'm,
I was like, things change and
it's
they
been
get
my
magnified and people start doing things when people die. And I'm like, why are we doing this level of things and why are we behaving this way? Okay, so this is an actual universal
from what I've
social
seen. Yes, from what I've seen, yes. Especially like the more chaotic the family is as a unit, the more you're going to see shenanigans when people pass away. And so it's not every family, but it's a lot.
because we've seen I shouldn't. We've seen the Tyler Perry movies where, he's talking about the funeral services where things have just kind of exacerbated and gotten out of control. And there's a part of me that's just like, I really wish that the writing was better in the wigs. But mostly, I do think that that's a shared experience where it's like you see the family in the most raw form around the time that people die. They start doing things that I haven't seen Auntie do that. I haven't seen my cousin, fight somebody. I haven't witnessed these
Yeah.
things. And why is this coming out at this moment where I'm actually trying to grieve? And then does that impact our ability to grieve? Because we're now in a household where I'm imagining people are in shock and they're angry and they're lashing out or they're withdrawing or they're becoming suicidal or all of these things at one time.
It definitely might impact some people's grieving process because I know usually when there are the loud, more attention seeking people in the family, there's going to be the opposite also. There's going to be those people who kind of fall by the wayside and like stay in the background, like, okay, there's already enough going on. I don't need to add to it. I don't want to pile on. But at the same time, the grieving process has to happen for everyone. So, you know, even if you honor that grief in a different way, like case in point, you were at my mother's funeral.
I
you
know God is good. I was literally, this was in my mind. Why are we, okay, go ahead, Janelle, because I can't do this today. Okay.
Okay, so you were at my mother's funeral. There were a lot of shenanigans at my mother's funeral. And because of that, I felt like, okay, I have to keep it together for my daughter. I'll grieve later. And
This
I just kind of,
baby.
yeah, I had to just keep it together and push forward and do what I needed to do. Sorry. Sorry.
It happens. And remember what I told you at the beginning of this, which is give us grace. We're just getting started. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Janelle.
So yeah, so at my mother's funeral, I didn't even eat. I was so in shock and so numb at the same time. Like I spent the whole day just seething and trying to keep it together for my daughter because she didn't know who was in the casket. She didn't know anything. She was 4 at the time, so it was just trying to manage my emotions and stay together enough to parent and function as an adult while also allowing my family to grieve, grieving with them as much as I could, but also letting them do that from afar, like loving them from afar. Like, okay, y'all doing a little much. I need to keep it together over here, so I'm gonna let y'all go over there.
It must be hard. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners can understand. I haven't lost my parents. And, like, I I think that one of the things I remember about the loss of your mom was I was torn in different directions because I wanted to grieve personally. This is somebody that I had drawn pictures to and watched sing my entire childhood, and who I have these memories of confronting me and loving on me. She was my biggest fan. Like, now she would fight, my mom would probably fight with her, but she was my biggest fan. Like, your mom was towards end of life and found a way to show up in the middle of the dead winter in Salinas at my book signing. And it I wanted to grieve. I wanted to be sad. And I think that it was hard for me to do things like even read a poem. And I couldn't figure out at the funeral like how to use my iPad. I had to call my dad up because I was shaken. And then y'all had me up there trying to play the piano and I'm tearing stuff up. That was all part of that. But the other side was I felt like I don't know how to be there for my friend who is experiencing something that, if this is what I'm going through with the loss of your mom, I can't imagine what it's like to be you. And how do I hold space for you while also honoring my own grief? I just got chills throughout my whole body. And I don't even know if there's an answer for that, but it's such a pure feeling. I don't know. What are your thoughts about what it means to have multiple connections to grief at one time?
I think that it's difficult because I was kind of in the same situation for different reasons during my mom's passing. Um, and I think for me, I've always thought of grief as not being linear. So I don't judge the process and how it looks. I don't even judge how it feels. I recognize that, you could be laughing one second and you could be in tears the next just because you had one memory of her or one thought that just took you to a place that you weren't prepared for. Uh, so I think that the complexity of grief is that you feel multiple things at once and you might be flooded with emotions that have you torn in different directions, but that's part of the process. That's
It's
the
messy.
complexity and the
It's
beauty of it at the same time, I think.
so, and that's interesting because there, to me, there's BT and there's AT, which is before Terrence died and after Terrence died. And I remember before he passed, I had already gone through this loss of Whitney Houston. I had seen her the night before she was killed, and that really, it messed with me. And people who've known me my whole life, you guys know, we don't even need to say what the attachment to Whitney Houston was as a muse. That was a huge loss, and I wasn't experiencing that by myself. I think the entire Black community was grieving, and probably the entire world. The same with Michael Jackson and Prince. But I thought that I had figured out grief, and I was like, you know what? I know what's going to happen. I'm going to gain a little weight. I'm going to start eating some carbs. I'm going to cry. I'm going to be depressed for a while, and then I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to move through. And that didn't happen when it came to the Terrence situation. You brought up how sometimes just seeing something can do something. I remember I was driving down the freeway that I drive to work every day.
Mhm.
And this is a couple years after he passed. And you know how you just don't pay attention to signs? I looked at the sign and I had this strong memory of, what we had done, like on Ventura Boulevard, and I just had a breakdown in my car, and I was like, I'm not gonna be okay. I'm never gonna be okay. This is hard. It made me feel like I was broken. Like, why are you still grieving years later? And I know that some of the people watching this are thinking about that. Like, I thought I had gotten through that period. Why is it coming back up again? What is that?
Well, that's the normal progression of grief. We tend to be taught that, grief has its stages and once you get through the stages, it's done. But anybody who's really ever loved someone that they've lost knows that it's not a linear process and it
Mhm.
doesn't just end. There's no abrupt ending to grief. There's no way to just get over it. I lost my grandmother when, like I said, I was in elementary school, 7, 8, whatever. I still think about that woman. I still hear her voice. I still think about her on her birthday. Mother's Day was the day she died. I still think about her
Oh,
every Mother's Day. Like that, it's not going to end. I'm in my big fours now, as some people say. Um, and I'm still thinking about this all the time. It doesn't go away for me. And there are some losses that just are harder to heal from. Like some losses, maybe you go through the cycles a couple of times, and maybe every now and then you have a thought about them and it brings up some sort of emotion. But some losses, it's really hard. It really hits you. Like I said, with my dad, losing him to his drug addiction, not seeing him after we left New York and moved to California, that was okay. That's whatever. That's just a part of my lore. But when I lost my grandma, oh no, I was forever changed. That sits with me to this day.
So
Losing.
it is okay. It's okay for us. What I'm hearing is that it is okay for us to tap back in and for grief to come back out of nowhere, even years or decades later.
Yeah,
Most of the time, my another significant loss for me, I lost all four of my grandparents, which is something that people go through. You lose your grandparents. My grandmother Hazel was raised me like this is the person who walked me to school in the morning and made my lunch when I went to school because my mom was getting her master's degree. And I think losing her, it created this hole that I had never felt before. And I was I was an adult when I lost her, but to this day, whenever I get in the kitchen, I feel like my grandmother is with me, and I'm happy when it's those happy moments, and it's like, let's go ahead and try to make this sweet potato pie that we know is not going to be my grandmother's level, but I feel her spirit. But then I get upset because I'm like, but you're still really sad, and you get really, really sad on her birthday. You don't want to go nowhere, and you sit at home and you want to watch Lifetime movies.
or
That
buy ice cream cake. Her favorite
you
ice cream.
know. So this is the other thing that I had to accept for myself was it's okay to give yourself the things that you need. And it's interesting. One of my closest friends just lost his brother. And this is somebody that he has tried really, really hard to help out and to ensure that, he could become sober and, he could live the rest of his life. And he passed away of a drug related death. And I know that for him, his thought was, how am I going to get out of bed? Like, and not even really necessarily understanding that it was connected to the death, but just like, I just don't feel right. Like, I don't feel like me. Like, I'm not the person who lays in the bed in the morning and can't get out. And there are people who are struggling with this, who look like us, who are grieving, and they're wondering, is it okay for me to have a morning in bed? Is it okay for me to not go do things or to eat that pint of ice cream or to take time off of work just because I'm sad and I'm not sick. I don't have a reason to not, I just don't want to go.
It's certainly okay because I do it. So you were talking about how grief kind of comes back up, right? Well, for me, June, I guess May, June, and into July is always kind of difficult ever since my mom passed because it's first my grandmother's death anniversary in May, and then my grandfather's birthday. He was a big part of my life. He was born in May, and then June is when my mom took a turn for the worst, and she got really sick and had to stay in the hospital for the rest of the month, and then she passed and buried her a week before my birthday. So it just all kind of ran together. And I've noticed about myself that there are times when June, May into June, I just can't get in out of the bed sometimes. And I've had to, postpone things, tell my supervisors when I was trying to get my license before I got licensed, I would tell them, oh, I can't come to supervision. I can't come talk about these cases. I can't go to work and talk to kids about whatever is going on because it just seemed like, especially right after my mom passed, all of my cases were people with cancer, different kinds of cancer just kept popping up. I'm like, what is the universe trying to tell me? And I figured the universe was telling me I needed to take a step back. So I took a whole year off from therapy, actually more than a year, because I went on and did some other things, worked for CPS and everything else. But eventually I came back. But I needed to take a break from therapy altogether. Even though I felt like this was my calling and my passion and this is what I was led to do, I just knew that for my healing process, I could not keep opening up that wound in that way.
And
So rest is
everything
necessary.
everything doesn't work for everybody is what I've learned. And even things that may have worked before for you may not work with this loss or this grief. I learned that in when I lost my sister. And when I tell you, getting that phone call at 4 a.m. was, I've never experienced anything like that in my entire life. I went into a state of confusion that I've never experienced before. And I remember saying, okay, well, you did the grief group with the last loss, so go and do the grief group. And I just sat in that grief group and I was just so angry. And I felt like the people who were in there, they didn't understand what I was going through. And it just felt different. And I said, why is this not working this time? You know, like this was helpful before, but this time it's not. And is that something that you see with people, with adults who, have multiple losses, that we have to change sort of our strategies in how we grieve?
I definitely think that each each loss is unique and each loss kind of changes us a little bit. We look at death and loss as a trauma, a form of trauma. And trauma rewires the brain. So if your brain is rewired with every single loss, then what worked the first time isn't going to work as well the next time. So we have to adjust our ways of treating things and adjust our ways of handling ourselves. We have to adjust our self care. We have to adjust our routines. We have to adjust all the ways that we approach our losses because they do add up. They do change us in ways that might be small sometimes, might be huge sometimes. We just have to figure out what is going on with us and adjust to that process that needs to happen.
You bring up a really good point, and let's talk about Blackness for a second, because one of the things that I've wondered is why sometimes it feels so hard to be in the skin. And I think this was part of what some of my feelings in the grief group were we already have it hard. There's already a lot going on. When Terrence was killed, 5 days later, George Floyd died. And you know what that death symbolized for the Black community. George Floyd's murder wasn't just about, we've seen this our entire lives. We've seen this, Ice Cube, Tupac, they were all talking about how Black men have been murdered by the police. So this isn't unique to us. What was unique was that we had to watch it. We had to watch it happen, and we had to go to work. And both of us work in behavioral health, and we have to help other people while we are grieving. We are destroyed. We see ourselves in this man. Then add on to that I just lost one of the most important people in my entire life 5 days earlier. And this feels like a normal thing when you're in this skin. It feels like we are constantly grieving, whether it is the loss of someone in our lives. Right now, the majority of the Black community is grieving the fact that we're walking into a year where we don't know if we're going to be safe. We're grieving an election that meant so much to us. Yeah. And how do we be okay with all of these things happening? It feels like every time you turn around, like somebody's acting up at work, or you lose your job, you lose your house, you have financial struggles, and these are all forms of grief that we have. You lose your health. I went through a period, and you remember when I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, how it changed me. Like, I was sad because I was like, I can no longer, like, I'm not the same person anymore.
Yeah.
What do we do with all of these things happening all the time?
Well, I can't say I know exactly what to do, but I do know that it is necessary to find community and be in community with people who
Mm.
are like you, people who share your experiences and who sympathize with what you're going through in a way that only we can, really. I
How do we
think
do that as in our generation, as millennials and post millennials? Because when we were growing up, what did we have? We had Mount Nebo Missionary Baptist Church,
we
and we
have church.
had in Salinas, California, and that is where our family was. We had a group of people who would lift us and who would feed us if we lost our jobs, and if we fell on hard times and we started using drugs. Those men would go into crack houses. Literally, I saw my dad do that my entire childhood, and literally drag people out. Like, this isn't about to be
I
you,
can
you
imagine your
know.
dad.
And but he literally did, though. I'm not even making that up.
I
And
know he did.
I think that there's beauty in even you saying that there's this community, but where do we get that from today? Because so many of our people are not going to church, and that's not our place anymore, where everything happens, from politics to socialization to feeding. A lot of us do, but there's a lot of our generation that is not in church. Where are the other places that we can go to build that community?
There are a lot of online communities popping up. I know you've probably heard of the Black Project 2025 online. There's also different communities that you can foster for yourselves. So, like, there's collectives of Black therapists on Facebook that I belong to some groups. We discuss things, we have retreats and meetups and all kinds of things. And we're intentional about creating safe spaces to fellowship and to network and to grow and engage our community. And sometimes it can start with just engaging the people that you know. One thing I've done with some of my therapist friends, we've gotten together and just gone to dinner or just gone to lunch, just once every month or so, just to kind of catch up, to make sure that we're aware of what everybody's doing, what everybody's needs are, so we can network amongst ourselves and we can make sure everybody eats and everybody feels like they have someone to share the burden and share the load of this heavy life that we're living.
I appreciate that, and really thinking outside the box. So that's one of the beautiful things about social networking is we have a lot more options than we did, when we were young in Salinas, California, and there was no internet. Because there was a time before there were no social media and social media groups. And so I appreciate Golden Global is a global organization. And I have people who I connect with, organizations like Kuva Africa in South Africa, as an example, that are honing and nurturing young Black women and professionals that we're connected with, and companies in Italy and different places. Earlier this year, I had a really difficult loss. And I feel like every year I'm starting to say these things where it's like, well, this was the year of this and this was the year of that. But I lost my cousin, Tamika, who and it shattered me differently in many ways. Now, this is like one of my best friends, like in my entire life. And my entire childhood was informed by Tamika. And I had a really hard time with letting go when she passed. And I didn't want to talk to her because I felt like it was going to be real. I went through this same thing with my piano mentor, Pat Kason, who was dying of cancer. And I remember the last time I saw her, I just wasn't okay. It was too difficult for me. I didn't want to see her like that. And I've carried some guilt around feeling like I couldn't or didn't say goodbye in the right way. And I wonder, I know that this is something that is very difficult for people. You know, sometimes with these sudden losses, you can't say goodbye. You know, you just find out. Well, my sister, there was no saying goodbye. It was just, you know, your sister's gone. But um, I knew they were dying. And it was so painful that I just kind of checked out. And what, I mean, what is that? Like, and what do we do when we feel that way?
A lot of people think that grief is just the actual loss or the death of someone brings on the grief, but really grieving starts with chronic illness. When you see somebody who's got cancer and they're going through, seeing them suffer, it causes the same feelings, the same anger, the same denial, the same depression, and all the things that grief causes. It is a grieving process. It starts sooner, and you have to give yourself some grace around it, because at the end of the day, grief is hard for everybody. Loss is hard for everybody. And a lot of times we don't know what to say. We don't think we have the right words, or we don't know how to comfort someone when we see them suffering. We see that, you know, I went through the same thing dealing with my mom's cancer. She progressively lost weight, lost her hair, couldn't eat. She was going through, and it was hard to watch.
It was hard for me, and I wasn't there as much as you were, but just seeing her, I think the last time I saw her wasn't in Vegas,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that was very brief, and I just it was it's all this has been difficult
Yeah. She
letting.
died last month. And it's hard to have to watch what you know is going to result in death, what you know is going to result in the loss of this person. And but you're also watching them slowly become less of themselves. And I think that's the hard part with watching it. Like, if it's a sudden death, like you said, it's one thing. It's like, okay, somebody just passed away. I know about it. And now I can start my grieving process. I can deal with my feelings and manage my feelings around that. But when it's a slow progression, it's hard to be able to sit there every day and watch someone become less and less of the person that you remember, of the person that you would want to remember.
those
It's
um those losses are they're painful, and they feel like they just grate at you for a long time. And there's points that you get to where you're like, Lord, I'm praying for mercy because I don't want them suffering, and then feeling guilty about that. You know, I think what I hear you saying is it's okay to feel how you feel and to not have to carry guilt. Now, this is the thing about people in my life. And this is why today Tamika is a huge ancestor for me. She's somebody I talk to all the time. When I hear certain songs, I'm like, for some reason, "If" by Janet Jackson is one of those songs, random song, but when we were children, like we would argue about what Janet was saying because we didn't have the internet, so we didn't really know the lyrics. But
and
I think about
also,
those, those moments, and their spirits are with me, and I found a lot of comfort post death And I've had to really honor everyone who's passed away and come to some sort of understanding that they're no longer here. And what I choose to believe and what I feel is that they're ancestors and that they're with me all the time. And how powerful is it to have people who you love so deeply that are looking out for you? Because listen, I know sometimes at work and in different places, I'm like, now my ancestors protected y'all, or my ancestors, opened these doors. And I love to think of the people that I've lost in that way because they have become like angels. Like we speak their names, we remember them, we tell their stories, and there's so much beauty there. It doesn't erode the sadness, but it kind of balances out some of it for me, where it's like, we're going to have some good days and we're going to have some days where, if you know what it means to hit the floor, or, like to be in the shower and just have a breakdown out of nowhere, then you know what I'm talking about. And so I'm so grateful to all of my angels and all of my ancestors. Now, Janelle, a lot of Golden Global followers and people who are connected to us, they are in the space of leadership because our company teaches people how to be servant leaders. And one of the things that is really hard for people while they're grieving is, how do I show up at work? Because some of us don't have jobs where we can detach for 3 months because we're grieving. And some of us have to then show up and still be the adult in the room and realize that the people working with us do not care that we lost somebody, that they are expecting you to show up in the same way. And I wonder, what can we do as leaders, as professionals, while we're grieving? Are there things that you've seen that have worked, or suggestions that you have that could help us to keep our jobs and also be vulnerable with our teams?
Well, from a leadership standpoint, there's the founder of Blavity, one of the founders of Blavity, Morgan DeBon. She was talking about leadership on her TikTok recently, and she was talking about how her goal is to train her people so well that even if she steps away, things still run appropriately.
Beautiful.
I think that something can be taken from that and applied in this setting, but in other settings as well. With grief specifically, manage your feelings around your grief. Do what you need to for your grief, while also getting your work done as much as you possibly can. But also delegate. You have a team for a reason. Do the things that you need to do, things that are specific to your position, but delegate out if you can.
Authorize things.
Yeah, keep the business flowing as much as possible, but also learn how to manage your caseload and your people in such a way that everything still gets done, even if your hand isn't exactly the one on it all the time. Because you're going to need to manage your feelings, maybe not just around grief, maybe other things come up in life. And at the end of the day, as leaders, you still have to take care of yourself first, because the job will be there. Whether you are the CEO or whether you're sweeping the floor, that job is going to be there. And there's going to be somebody to fill it, even if you pass away. So you need to make sure that you keep you intact. You take care. That's one thing I learned working for the government here in the state of Georgia, because they did not care. They would replace you so quick and you'd be out on mental health leave from all the stress they put you through. But they've got somebody else coming down the pipe ready to assume the role and take over your desk every single day of the week. So
I think one of the things that worked well for me, and I have these dynamic relationships with anybody that I supervise. It's kind of the calling card of Golden. Now, the problem, I'm a servant leader, so I serve the people that not only are our customers, but the people who report to me. And I was just very honest with them. I let them know, guys, like, this is what I'm experiencing right now. And I'm going to need some grace, and I need some support from y'all. You know, I'm not at 100%, and that's going to need to be okay. And we all need to accept and understand that I'm not the Dr. Golden that y'all saw last week. And I'm going to work to get back to that. But right now, what I need is for my team to show the same kind of love and support to our mission that I have shown to y'all. And I've gotten a lot of people who have been really supportive and who have really lifted me. And you're right about the delegation piece. Some people would come in and say, Golden, I'll take care of this for right now. And I'm gonna need your signature on all 15 of these forms, but I'll take care of this. And that's the beauty of loving your people and having this servant leadership style, is that, you know, your people will get back to you. They're not just looking to take from you. They see you as a full person, and they know that you're not a robot, that you're going to have times when you're down, and they'll lift you up. I love that.
Yeah, I love that for you. It speaks to your leadership style and who you are as a person, that your team is able to support you in that way and not, you know, let things fall by the wayside.
So that's what we're doing at Golden Global Enterprises, is we are training people to be servants of the people, servant leaders. We are lifting up the spirit of Gandhi and Mandela and Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr. and my homeboy Malcolm X. And we want people to be okay. We're going to get ready to close in a little bit. And shout out to me for not having a breakdown. When I thought, I was like, so you're going to start with the most difficult topic as your pilot episode for Golden Talks. And, you know, I think I needed to do that because people need to understand why I've been away for so long. They're like, hey, you've been a public figure for all these years, and then you just disappeared, and you were building a school, and you were, you know, in the back quietly doing some things, but it was because I wanted to heal. And I felt like I needed to take some time for me, and I had to set some boundaries with family, friends, I had to change some of the things that I did. But I'm glad I did that because, you know, I don't know if I'll ever heal from these losses fully or what that really means, but I know that I'm okay, and that I have a spirit of gratitude and understanding, and that things are going to be okay. They're going to be. It's this, the law of life. So let me ask you this in closing, and this is what I'm going to ask everybody moving forward, because, you know, I'm calling in the spirit of Oprah.
Okay.
What is healing to you?
To me, healing is a journey and not a destination. When I was listening to you talk, you were saying that you needed that time and you're not completely healed, but nobody ever is completely healed. Because, like I said, there's always
Mm.
the scars and the rewriting, the rewiring of our brains from what we've been through. So it's not that you're trying to get to a destination, a set destination. It's a constant journey, never ending.
It's a constant journey. Thank you, Janelle, for lifting up our people. I know you're a proud Spelman alum. Shout out to the HBCUs in here. And I'm so grateful for your light and for who you are as a human being on this planet. We should all aspire to do something for this world the way that you have. And I love you deeply. And I'm grateful for you being our very first talk. And you know, we'll be doing this again when we talk about grief in 2025. Thank you to everyone who watched today on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and just know that you have a home at Golden Global. And until next time, enjoy. go.